We got Jason on the line here. What do you want to ask him?
When you first started out your journey in real estate investing, what were some of your self-doubting beliefs and how did you overcome that?
Anyone who says they don't have doubts and fears will be lying, right? There's always the fear of the unknown, right? That's usually that biggest part. The key is making it real and making it actionable. Always starts with that first step. So creating those first steps, make it doable and approachable and attainable dream. So understanding what is that first step I need, because then that first step lets you to that second step, right? And so those limiting beliefs appear, right? But when you can make it actionable, then it's just that part of just, okay, the more I know, the less I'll fear.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. I'm very excited for today's show. It's another one of our Ask the Expert episodes. We've got two amazing people on the line here with us. A man with a ton of experience in this business, Jason Yarusi, and a motivated aspiring investor, Sassy Taylor. So first, let's introduce you to Jason. He's the founder of Yarusi Holdings with his wife, Pili, and they have $75 million in assets under management across 850 multifamily units. He's an avid runner, workout enthusiast. He hosts the Multifamily Live podcast and the Jason and Pili project. He wakes up daily at 4:32 a.m. when I'm going to ask you about that, so get ready. He's an aspiring ukulele player, pronouncing that in the Hawaiian way. And most importantly, a father to three amazing kids and a husband. So that said, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. When you say ukulele better than I do, my wife will be massively proud. And I have a long way to go with these bear claws I have, but we're getting there for sure.
Yeah. So I'm active duty military, and I remember one deployment. I was trying to figure out, how to play the guitar, and I ended up buying a ukulele. Sorry, I still say ukulele a lot too, but I ended up buying one of those because it's a lot smaller. It's portable.
Yeah.
And those things are fun. I got to tell you, they're fun. I mean, once you get past the stigma of, a big grown man playing this little tiny instrument, they're a lot of fun. But so one thing, like I said, I was going to ask you, why 432? Why not 430 or 429?
You want to set the narrative, right? Because 430 can seem paradigm. It could just go and past, right, in that part. But I typically just say 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. And that just happens. 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I've done that now routinely, and it just sets my day. It's one of the parts I do for my morning is alarm goes off 4:32. The killer is never hit the snooze alarm, right? There's no reason to have it. Just 4, 3, 2, 1 up. Yeah. And it's memorable, and you do it and you get up and you just get going.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. I had somebody, I think this is Hal Elrod. I heard him speak once, and he was talking about that snooze button. He's like, if people hate waking up so much, why do they keep on hitting the snooze button and doing it over and over and over again? And I think that's the best explanation I've ever heard of that one. Just
it's that goal. We all set up those lofty goals, and we don't create a practice to take that first step, because most times we see those goals as something we want, but there's no substance to it. And so it doesn't mean a lot to us. So whether we get up at 4:30 or 8 o'clock when we should be getting up at 7, it doesn't mean enough. So we'll think we're going to do it, just like New Year's resolutions, and we'll put it there because there's nothing underlying. Like, okay, what would 7 a.m. do for me? Like, how great would my life be if I get this extra hour back? What could I accomplish? It's just like, I think it would be good to wake up at 7, but then that's when it's easy to hit that snooze alarm.
Yeah. Nice. So 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Good. I might do a 5:43 a.m. every morning then, and we'll see about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put the alarm clock back a little bit, and I can do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. But
there you go. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Nice. So I assume you got a morning routine going. Do you want to step us through that real quick?
Sure. So honestly, at 4, 3, 2, 1, get up. I drink a large glass of water. It's the first thing I do. Go make a coffee, and then I meditate and spend time meditating. I'll do some affirmations, some brain games on my phone, and then I'll go run. And I run every day. I've been doing that for a couple of years now, typically 5 to 6 miles. I did about 2,500 miles around there last year. Okay. So I put some good tread out there to run. But that just sets it. It's a good place for me to get my mind right. And it's just one of those things where, just like getting up, it's that you do the things that not every day is going to be perfect. And then it makes other things easier to accomplish. And you also get your wins out of the day, right? Nice. So just like anything else up there, if you set the narrative, this is what you do, you can prepare yourself for the day, and you'll have things come up that aren't ideal. right? But you've already created wins. And even though they're small things, right? Like, I don't know, drinking a glass of water in the morning can be small, but like over time, the routine of just having that habit that's pushing in the right direction, it creates that incremental improvement that you can constantly build on. And I find with even my own goals, sometimes we get pushed off our goals because our mind hasn't been there, right? So if like, I don't know, pick anything, right? I want to climb Mount Everest. Well, I've never done it. So we think about the top of Mount Everest and you get scared to even try, or you get fallen on the part. But if the idea is like creating those little wins, okay, what's that little win? Okay, look at a guy who's done this consistently and always won. Look at the type of gear I may need. Look at the ideal time in a year to do that. You start creating these wins, it makes it more accomplishable. Yeah. And that's where a lot with our morning routine builds things into.
It creates momentum. I mean, if you can start the morning right and you get those wins, like you say it up there, you just got a little bit of momentum stacked up and going. So
absolutely.
Yeah, yep. I love it. So let's talk a little bit more about your background. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and kind of lead us up to the point to where you decided to actively pursue apartments?
Sure. So actually grew up in New Jersey, then moved to New York City, lived about 13 years in New York City. My wife and I met in 2013. We actually didn't get together as a couple till about 2010. And from that point, we were in a lot of different spaces. I had opened some restaurants, opened and sold a brewery. I'd done a number of different things in that part. When we got together, currently after that, Hurricane Sandy happened. When that happened in 2012, 2011, right there, right at the tail end, my father has a niche business where he's lifted and moved homes for decades now, about 40 plus years. So we decided that we were going to go out there and help dad. My brother was working for me, came out there to New Jersey, and we helped my dad for a couple of years, really just keep up with just a massive demand of projects. And so he was doing 12, 13 a year. And then we jumped up to 300, 350 a year. It was just a very pushing time, but the goal was, I wasn't in the business. Love my dad, great business. It just wasn't the desire to do that. So we're really psyched to help dad, get him really push forward the business. But we knew there was always going to be another narrative, right? And so we took, which we thought was the next logical step, right? So Pili was pregnant with our first child, and we were like, okay, we want to find ways to do real estate to get our time back. And so what we thought was the logical step, she got a realtor license and we started flipping homes, right? So we went from really busy in construction, 30 active projects easily at a time, to now having a whole nother side activity that created chaos, right? And that stayed fun. And so we did that. We were actually doing pretty good, but it was fighting a narrative. We were getting further away from it. It took us to 2015, Pili actually met a friend who was buying some rentals out of state, putting together a team, getting them fixed up, getting them rented. And then all of a sudden, like having that process, they were starting to receive checks. We said, well, that's pretty cool, but why don't we do like 2, 3, and 4 units? So we started looking at that. And again, process worked great. We're like, okay, cool. Checks are showing up. But to scale that, it just seemed like anarchy, right? So we're going to scale all these duplexes around the city. It just seemed like madness. So we said, well, what else is there? And I came upon apartment investing, right? And it was something that you see the apartment building, but you never thought about the process that you could do that. But it just clicked. I was like, well, that's economies of scale. It's better than 2, 3s, and 4s because you can treat it. I went from the biggest outdoor restaurant in New York City. I went to the part. I just saw the scalability with it, right? It's like the same thing. If you have a 20-seat restaurant to 200-seat, same process, right? It's just looking now, what's the building? I can get more economies of scale. I get better discounts on product, all those other points you see with a restaurant. The same thing happens with being able to hire staff more efficiently, having a routine that can push levers. So we sold the small properties, went all into large multifamily, and really dove into a few markets and set our sights on Louisville, Kentucky. And in 2017, we brought our first building, which was a 94 unit. Right there in Louisville, Kentucky. It was May of 2017. So that pretty much brings us to where and why we got started.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. I think a lot of people take a similar route where they start in real estate in general, single family, small multifamily. What was the biggest challenge you had going from your small multifamilies to, I think you said 94 unit, right? What was the biggest challenge there?
That's a great question. What it comes down to is that you got to make sure that you put pieces in place, and it's not knowing what you don't know, and that's sometimes a plus and a minus, right? And so the best thing to do is put someone on your side who can be a mentor, a partner. Like, so we had some other people that were already doing it successfully, because it's not so much the steps, right? You get it. need to find a building, need to secure a loan, need to find capital to do it, need to, of course, put together a team to run the property. Okay, sure. Pretty basic. Everybody gets that concept, but it's those little in between steps that come up that maybe you haven't heard about. Maybe something with the SEC where it could derail you because you don't know how to Google it to find the answer. But when you have that person that's right there and you text them and within 3 minutes, you're back on track and not losing those weeks. Just like we see with the momentum, those are things that push forward on your momentum. So it does become that mental state, right? So you can do what you want. You can't do everything, but you can do what you want as long as you start preparing your mind. So when we had decided, okay, we're going to go large, it was just understanding in our mind, like making our mind understand that this makes sense because of this, right? And where you hear the narrative a lot is that, I'll start safe with a 6 unit. But if you have that same thought, well, what makes a 6 safer than a 20? What makes a 20 safer than a 50? What makes a 50 safer than a 100? And you can keep that narrative running. And it's not so much you find safety, and that's why loans are more attractive. You can move the lever with larger product for a number of different reasons if you can manage it correctly. But I had a conversation yesterday where someone was like, I'm going to think about multifamily, going into like 20 units. Should I just buy a single family first? And it was like, well, does your mind need that? Or like, because it seems like if you want to do 20 units, what's the business philosophy for the single family? It's not like you're not going to get like a social card for it, or there's not going to be anything that's going to help you. Like if that's what your mind needs to say, okay, I can get into the game to do this. Sure. But in the same part, if you want to run a marathon, starting to, swim across a lake is not going to really be something either. And so where's the parallel and what do you need to get yourself across that mental hurdle?
Yeah. I like that. You say if that's what your mind needs to do. And I appreciate how you put that, because when I decided to do multifamily, I was looking at the 6 units, I toured a 6 unit, I toured an 8 unit, I toured a 10 unit, things in that size, because that's what my mind thought that I could do next. I was into single family and, I couldn't see the big picture. I didn't realize that you could just jump into the larger multifamily. And, it wasn't until I was around a bunch of other people who'd done it that, I caught on to that idea. Yeah. So fortunately, I didn't spend any time in the, 6 to 20 range and jumped into larger stuff first, but
there you go. Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's talk about your big burning why. You've talked, you've brushed upon it, throughout what you've said already, but if you could distill it down, what's your big burning why for this?
It could be a cop out with family, right? So I have 3 little kids, 6, 4, and 2. Pili and I used to work the restaurant space and the bar space in New York City, right? And you'd go to work at 10 at night and come home at 8 a.m., right? And so it's a whole different lifestyle, a whole different narrative. And you want to find a time where you can control your time, right? You want to set up the narrative that, okay, I can dictate how my day goes. And everyone else can do that too. It's just that choice is if that's important to you, and there's times of just choosing that, okay, I'd rather spend the time like we started homeschooling when we just moved to Tennessee, where I can go out there and play with my kids and just help them focus on anything, right? We had them, I said, hey, they have some little savings we made for them. I said, hey, we're going to buy this apartment building. Do you want to put this little money in there? Because we take them around, to some of the buildings where we're in different spots. And we just say, hey, listen, that building, we make it a better place for people to live. And then they say, well, what do you mean? And we talk to them about like, well, sometimes the building doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. And there's people living there. And we try and make it a happier place to live. And they're like, oh, that's great. And so now they'll see that building and be like, oh, we're making that better, and so now they're putting a little part in it, but they can see it that end instead of being the other way of like, having to think about it from like a real estate or investment side. And that's what it comes back to. And even our entire approach is that if we make the place a better community, it of course makes tenants happier, which of course creates more returns, which of course makes happier investors, right? And so it's, if you can win across the board, what else do you need to do?
Yeah. I mean, happier tenants will renew their leases more frequently, which saves you money. They'll pay a little bit more, happily pay a little bit more to live there. And it's win-win-win. And it's not a cop out. I mean, my big burning why has a lot to do with my family. And, Sassy and I have talked a couple times prior to recording, but I know that's a big part of her big burning why too. So, and interesting. I was talking to my son. He's 8 now. This conversation happened about a year ago, where I was explaining how the apartment thing worked, how people pay you money to live in an apartment that you own. I remember his eyes got big one day. He's like, Dad, you need to buy lots of apartments then, and it was just, okay, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's fun to see kids that age where the light goes on and they actually start understanding the reasons behind it. But
Yeah, that's fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that said, give us an idea of, one of the projects you guys have done, or an overview of your philosophy, if you would, please.
Sure. You want to talk about the 94 unit that we first won?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. We said it was in Louisville, Kentucky, 94 unit. It was actually off market. We found it through a property management relationship. We put in an offer. I think they wanted 3.2. We offered 2.3. And so, or actually, I'm sorry, we were at 2.1. And so, but we passed along the narrative, like, this is why we're at this pricing, right? It was the father had passed away. He was in his 90s. The kids had owned it, who were in their 60s and 50s. They weren't living there. Nice building, but they just weren't taking care of it, right? They were just letting it happen because it wasn't their focus. Nobody was in real estate, and they countered back at a really nice 3.2 million. So we got zero on that one. So we said, oh, that's fantastic. So we said, thank you. We said, we appreciate it. And we went away. But so happened, I was probably late 2016, right? I'm forgetting, or early 2017, whatever's the case. No, it'd been late 2016. A couple months went by, property's still there, hanging out, hadn't sold, hadn't traded. Maybe they had talked to some other people, but probably everybody else was coming in at that price point that made sense, and it gets forgot, right? But time changes everything. So we went back. And I think we raised our price 50,000. So we were at 2,150,000 at the time. And within maybe 2-3 hours, we got a counter back at 2.6, right? So 600K off. We're like,
so they moved quite a bit that time.
Yep. Moved quite a bit. And you said, okay. So we went through a few lot of negotiations. We got to the end and we just said, listen, guys, we don't live here in Louisville. We're buying this with investors, and we sent them over like a snapshot of our analysis. Like, we're not trying to kill you, but we can't go anymore than this price of 2.3. We'd love to do it. And a day later, they came back and agreed. So took that to close. That was fantastic. It was a really nice building. The area is even trending today. It was like 97 or 90%, 98% occupancy in the area. Just like, we never marketed across that property, just driving on tenants. And they had like 7 or 8 tenants or units that were ready to rent. And the leasing person just was watching. I actually remember when we went to do the tour, she was watching Dog the Bounty Hunter, and she just didn't want to even talk to us. So I was like, oh, no wonder, right? So got in day one, did a lot of things, improving the landscape. They had like 4 maintenance guys that were running all over town, fixing their single family homes that the kids also owned, and being employed by this property. So it was running up the payroll like crazy. So we cut that back. The leasing office was like it was majority 1 bedrooms and some 2 bedrooms. The leasing office was a 2 bedroom. So we actually made that into just a 1 room. So the office right there with the bathroom, and then put in, quote unquote, another 1 bedroom out of that. So we got another unit out of that. They had 2 laundry rooms, and there's like 300 units in this area. These were the only laundry rooms. So we opened them up to other tenants, but neither of them were functional. So we put them both back online, put a cable contract in there that gave us more revenue generation. We did really like a water savings program across the entire property, which cut down our water bill between repairing leaks and changing out toilets and faucets. Cut our water bill by like 300,000. That at the time it made us, I think, about 300K on value just off the current cap. Probably at one point, I think we did about 60 units or so across the board that were returned. But in terms of 13 months in, we were able to refi the money, bring a ton out for investors. And we thought we were just going to hold it long term. Long story short, get back to early 2020. Area got so aggressive because there was an owner there who had owned property forever. He was really limiting what we could do in the area, because when you have the largest property, you kind of control the narrative, right? So he had like something like, I think it was like 280 units. He goes and sells the property, and the new buyers came in, started doing all kinds of premium units, doing everything else to push forward on the area, started getting a ton of path of progress that was nowhere seen back in 2017. And I said, man, this is an ideal time to look. So we actually sold that, and I started looking into December, sold that in January. Had like 6, we didn't market it, 6 offers without a market right there. really just crushed returns for investors. So we did really, really well for investors. They were psyched and really happy with that full progress, and moved a lot of them into another project.
Nice to hit a home run like that on your first deal, just something like that produces as well. And I mean, refinance out after a year and returning a lot of capital is not a small feat, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and that's part of the narrative for investors. Not every deal happens like this. So we had a lot of things that we did. We had a great business plan, but the path of progress in the area, we didn't model for that, even for the premium units, right? So we didn't set capital like, okay, we're going to do all these units in the future at premium, right? So there was never, we were getting 150, really $125 to $150 rent bumps just easily without doing anything, just paint simple, paint carpet, boom, just because of how far they were under market. But there was, if I had put in, granite in the area at the time, it wouldn't have drawn more money than Formica. It was just, it was just what it was. But it's really pushed forward, which was great, but it made sense to look at it there, because you constantly have to keep your head on a swivel, right? Because we didn't even for the refinance, that was unexpected because we never even game plan for that, so we typically will just underwrite, make sure the deal works, and not bank in the refi, because it's not always available. It's not always the right time. So having that and then being able to do it on the back end, it made complete sense.
Yeah. And we typically don't build refinances into our game plans, just because you never know what the interest rates are going to be like. You never know what valuations are going to be like, where cap rates are going to be. Yeah. So that's one thing we try to do, is keep the refinance out of our initial pro forma. And if it works without a refinance, it's going to work.
Yeah, I agree.
It'll work even better.
It gives you options, right? And you want to be in control of multiple options, and because it gives you the ability to have a plan, but when things change that are not foreseen, you're able to go with a good plan that's going to mimic, where you need to pivot to.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, so next question for you. What's next for you?
I'm going to play the ukulele at a family gathering. We haven't been back to see, we usually go to see Pili's family and my wife's family about twice a year in Hawaii. We haven't been back in over a year now because of everything with COVID. So by the time I get back, I'll do that. I want to run a 200-mile race. I've only run 100 miles so far. Nice. That's on the big agenda. So that will be good. And then we're going to do a development play now that we moved to Tennessee. So one of the 4 projects, we're going to continue to push forward with multifamily, just in our wheelhouse. So we're going to focus on one development play that we definitely want to do now that we're here in Tennessee.
Nice. I understand you got a conference coming up too, right?
We do. Oh, so multifamily live event. Thank you very much.
Man.
That comes up in June. I think June 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's going to be virtual. Going to have a ton of fun. We're working with some friends that put on dynamic conferences. They work with a team that has just done great jobs. We're really excited for that. But if you go over to multifamilyliveevent.com, you can find all the details there. And that would be fantastic. We'd love to chat about multifamily, talk about what we do and how you should do it too.
Yeah. And do me a favor, after the show, send me a link to that. And I'd love to put that in the show notes for anybody who's interested.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
So great. So let's bring Sassy on. Sassy has, experience in real estate, fixing up bank-owned properties. She went from there to wholesaling single family properties all in the Philadelphia area. She's now transitioning to multifamily. She's also a single mother of 3 kids, looking to build generational wealth for her family and show other women, especially Black women, that they can do it too. So that said, Sassy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's always fun. We talked several times prior to, and it's always fun having somebody a little more familiar on the other end of the line on this thing. So let's do this. Let's talk about you. Tell us a little bit about your background and your history and what got you into apartments.
So my main background was in the medical field. I started out in the medical field for years. And at one point I was a pre-med major student. I was a nursing student. And at some point I realized I just didn't want to be in the medical field anymore. I was always told that you're good at it, so that's where you should just be. And I realized that I wanted more out of life. So I started learning more about real estate and real estate investing. And I think I wanted to get more into that because I wanted to have more freedom. My kids are older. So, my oldest is 22 My son is 18 and my youngest is 15. So they're not babies anymore. But now at this stage in my life, I'm 41. So now I just want to live my life and just travel and do whatever I want to do. That's why I got into, real estate investing, because I really wanted to build generational wealth and then show other women that they can do the same thing too, especially in multifamily. I think I was first intrigued by multifamily. I was at an event for single family. And the guy that he made a comment, he said, I'm tired of going into rooms where I'm only seeing old white men sitting around the table. And he said, I want to see more women. And he said, I want to see more women of color. And he said, it's not an industry where it's dominated by women. And something in what he said really sparked. So from there, I was like, man, I need to go into multifamily. But even then, I didn't jump right into it. I think I was a little fearful of it. And, I didn't know too many people who did it. So, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I just started, investigating more and researching more. And I realized I was like, this is what I want to do, especially with the fact that you can drive the property value just by raising the NOI. When I found that out, I was like, oh, I'm sold.
Forced appreciation is amazing. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. So what's your big burning why? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, you talked about the travel and everything else, but if you could just put it in a couple of sentences, what's that big burning why for you?
Really for my kids, I think, because, being a single mom, my children have seen me struggle in so many different ways. And, your children become they're like my little cheerleaders, even though they're not little anymore, but they'll always be my babies, but they are your cheerleaders. And I want to be able to create a different life for them. So I didn't know about real estate investing growing up. There was no one in my family who really did that, except for my grandmom who, she owned properties, but it wasn't talked about. It wasn't something that was like, oh, investing, this is a thing. You can actually do this and you could actually make money and make passive income from it. And that wasn't talked about in my family. So I want to be able to change that for, grandkids, my future grandkids. I don't have any yet. But for my future grandkids, before they come, I want to be able to have a legacy and leave a legacy behind and then show other people how they can do the same thing as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. Incidentally, I still view my kids as little sometimes. My oldest is 21, and incidentally, she's going to hear this because she's our podcast editor too. So, but yeah, it's hard as a parent sometimes to look at your kids and realize they're adults, and the little cheerleaders. I love it. But all right. Well, here comes my favorite part of the entire show. Sassy, we got Jason on the line here. What do you want to ask him?
Hi, Jason. One of the questions I wanted to ask, I could probably ask you a ton of questions because I'm very inquisitive. But when you first started out your journey in real estate investing, what were some of your self-doubting beliefs? Or did you have any at all? And if you did, how did you overcome that?
Sure. So first off, you definitely talk to my wife. She's Hawaiian and she says the same thing. She's got to help other women, right? And women of color do this because for a part here, there's definitely not enough women in the space. So absolutely keep doing what you're doing. Great work. Anyone who says they don't have doubts and fears will be lying, right? There's always the fear of the unknown, right? That's usually that biggest part. But the key is making it real and making it actionable, right? So you have your big goals, right? So really to set up, to create the life, not only for your kids, but your grandkids, your great grandkids, everywhere down to help women, right? So fantastic goals. What is that first step that needs to be done? Because when you can do that, just like running these long races, just like doing these other parts, it's not the ends, right? The adventure is everything you're going to do, but it always starts with that first step. So what is that first step you need to do today? Is it to, learn more about commercial real estate? Is it to go get yourself in a bigger room where more people are doing this so you can understand that people like you each and every day are doing this? Is it to set the narrative on a market? What is that first step? Let's say it's the market. Okay. What's that next first step to the market, right? And so creating those first steps make it doable and approachable and attainable. And just like we talked a little bit on New Year's Eve resolutions, they're so lofty, but there's no basis to it, right? So I want to lose 50 pounds. What does that mean to you, right? So what is that thing that's going to happen if I do that? Like, there's no big, it's like the Instagram thing. It's probably going to look better if I have a mansion or $1 million. Well, if you do, is life perfect? Like, why does that mean anything to you. And it doesn't, right? Because it's not yours, it's someone else's dream. So understanding what is that first step I need, because then that first step lets you to that second step, right? And so those limiting beliefs appear, right? Okay, I had put together some money for like restaurants, but never thought about it from syndication. So how do I talk to people from that part when it's our first one? You know, how do we make sure we're right in the market? How do we go out there and qualify these loans? These are all doubts because you don't know it. But when you can make it actionable, then it's just that part of just, okay, the more I know, the less I'll fear.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. I think when you're new and you're first starting, you assume that when you see people who are experienced, you forget that they had to start from somewhere too. So, you know, you look at, you know, people like yourself and Brian now, and it's like, oh, you know, they seem so confident. They know what they're doing. But in the beginning, that probably wasn't the case at all. So
it's a fantastic point. Remember, everybody started anywhere. Like, even if you're going to talk to a broker, at some day it was their first day, right? And I always like to think of it as that there's either people one step ahead of me or one step behind me, right? So I could be one step to be Elon Musk, or I could be one step to being homeless, right? Just based on my choices, right? And we're not that far apart, but in that front, like the gap's not that big, but if we set the stage, we're setting the barriers mentally where people are, both stances, right? So we could make a lot of bad decisions and put ourselves in a scenario, right? Just by our daily decisions, but it's the daily decisions that get us there, right? So how you're taking on the activity, right? So I'm going to buy a multifamily. You hear that a lot. Then that's a great statement, but the doers are the ones that take that first step, right? And that first step allows you to really just build it and build it and build it, and not get lost on just buying the multifamily, but the steps to do, because it's going to be a repeatable process. You're not just going to buy one; you're going to buy a ton of them.
I'm going to connect some dots here. I mean, we talked about Jason's morning routine and creating momentum. It's the same thing with multifamily. You know, you start doing those little things and you start creating momentum and you get the ball rolling, you know, and that really works. And incidentally, you know, my first broker call ever, I wish I had that recorded so I could go back and it would be comical. It would be absolutely comical, you know, how that went. But yeah, everybody started brand new. And I mean, I wasn't born with, you know, multifamily properties around me. So
that's good. Thank you. I guess my next question would be, starting out as a newbie, how do you first begin to build your team? So I've heard several different investors have different takes on how they build their team.
Sure.
How do you start out when you really don't know anybody yet? You're just,
you know, a ton of people though. And so like, I'd stop that right there. You know, a ton of people. You're on the call today, you know, you're on the call today, you know, talking with Brian, you know, like you've had the conversation with Brian. You're like, so what are you good at? What do you want to do? And then combine, because you might be good at some stuff, but only a couple of them you like doing, right? So on that part, and then, you know, time, knowledge, credit, money, right? And so those are typically the four buckets. Some we have, some we don't at all points, right? And so, okay, what do you have? What do you need, right? So then those are the partners. Does that partner have an alignment of interest, right? So you start getting into multifamily forums, start talking to more women that there's women's groups, you know, taking down a bunch of friends as a women collective just took down a large property together as, you know, woman syndication. There are those groups, so get in the women multifamily groups or just multifamily groups in general. Where can you provide value to help somebody else? And now you can become part of a good team. So building it back now, what is one of the questions that's potentially tough, and I'm sure Brian here is it like, how can I help you? Right. Well, I don't know. I don't know what you do, you know? And so like, if someone came to me and was like, hey, you know, I'm great at lead generation. If I can bring a lead, can we talk about, you know, you walk me through the deal and helping me and potentially a partner? Yeah, sure. You know, but okay, cool. But if the question of like them not knowing the role and me having to like assign them something, but I'm not sure what they're good at, then that puts me at a place not being able to help them. Where if you can come like, I'm really fluent with underwriting. I'd love to help you, you know, with all the deals coming across so I can learn, you know, plus C, or in the same part, if you're really good at lead generation or these other points, you partner with someone who's really good with due diligence or other points that maybe you're missing on. So just really targeting, what are you good at? What do you like doing? And then at those, okay, where is that space? And now what are some areas that maybe you don't like doing and potentially not your strengths? Okay, those are probably the partners. And then making sure those partners, you have an alignment of interest, right? If one wants to solely look at the burn down buildings that want to be short holds and they just want to fix them and flip them, and you want to hold long term, you know, the narrative is not going to set. right? So making sure you have alignment of interest and you have a mission that works together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I started in a big, multifamily forum, and it was one of those where people could post questions about their deals, and they could post their underwriting spreadsheets up there. And I've got 2 degrees in math, so spreadsheets and numbers were my thing. And I didn't realize where this would lead, but I just started, just looking at their underwriting. And I figured I could probably learn something from this and maybe catch a couple of errors. And over the next several months of just helping other people out, it demonstrated to everybody in the group that I was really good at underwriting. And that ended up leading me to the first partnership. So, it's everything Jason said. You got to have that superpower. That's something that you're really good at. You got to be able to demonstrate to other people that you can do that. And if you can do both of those things and get yourself in front of more and more people, the partnerships will come.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That's good. Because it's funny how when you're new, you always say, I don't know anybody, but you do know people. And I'm an extrovert anyway. So I can talk to anybody. You can put me anywhere and I'll be able to hold a conversation with somebody. So I think it's easier for people like myself who don't mind, walking up to people and say, hey, how are you doing? And just kind of introducing yourself. So
you'll have it 20 times easier than I do. Because I like Pili loves being around people. You could put me and just let me run in the morning and be in a closet working all day and I'm cool, And so from that point, you just start talking about what you're doing and you'll find that alignment. Typically, if no one knows what you're doing, you won't create those synergies. But for you, just this is what I'm doing, right? Yeah. So, who else is doing this? Okay, let's talk. You'll never know where it comes from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Question for you. You mentioned like partnerships. What do you think are some of the pros and cons of syndication, syndicating deals versus joint venturing a deal?
Long-term business plan. Right. So what's your business plan, and so what's your ultimate goal, right? And you take that goal and you build it back to the steps, right? So if you're looking for, capital influx, being able to do larger properties, right? Then you're going to potentially look at the syndication. If you're looking at different hold strategies and maybe projects where smaller projects where you don't need to have so much bandwidth on capital, then you can do the joint venture, And so typically with syndications, you're able to buy larger properties and have more scale, right? Because you continue to do projects with more capital. And then on that part, you're typically having an exit. Maybe it's 3, 5, 7 years. Where joint ventures, maybe you're like, I want to buy this 8-plex with a partner and we're going to own it forever, right? And then it's going to become my kids. It's going to become my grandkids, So what's the business plan, right? At least right now. And then you start building back the plan to there.
Okay, awesome. Do you believe in finding the investors first and then the deal? Because I did hear another very reputable and popular multifamily investor say that if you find the deal and then the investor, it's too late.
I absolutely agree. So here's the thing. Imagine I have a deal, right? Mm-hmm. But I have no money. Now I need your money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it doesn't put me in a great spot because now I got to ask you for money. And then the same part too, you feel that I'm asking you for money, right? Where the other conversation comes down is that if you want to raise money without ever asking for it, start having to talk with people now to explain to them about what they're looking for, right? Because on that same narrative, I may have the best deal in the world, right? I think it's the best deal in the world, but the investor is not right for them. And so if I'm having that conversation where I need money, I need the money, but it's the best deal in the world. We're in the same front. I could have the conversation before. So the deal that we did, the first deal, well, we had already set up a pool of investors because for months we were talking to investors, explaining to them what we're doing, why we're doing it, what are they looking for? Because it is also a confused mind will say no. So if you, for first day, a lot of people haven't heard of apartment investing. If you now come to them, you're going to tell them about apartment investing. You're going to tell them about all these return structures you're doing. You're going to tell them about, syndication or whatever is that narrative. And then you're going to ask them for money. They're going to be like, whoa, what just happened? And it's going to be a hard conversation. But if you go the other way and you start talking to them to make sure that even the deal is going to write, why do they want to invest in multifamily? Like, what is it that is? Maybe they're looking for cash flow. Maybe they're looking for depreciation, tax advantages, you name it, right? But you get portfolio diversification. But then you can have that conversation and say, hey, is this something that could be interesting? They're like, yeah, like, and okay, how much money would you look to when I find the deal I'm going to find? Okay, maybe it's 50,000, 25,000, whatever's the case. But what that does is if you find that great deal before the investors, well, you don't know if you can raise that money, nor do you know if you can get that loan, right? So, but if you go the other way and identify the type of property you want to go after, but then have a lot of conversations with investors and you say, I feel good, I could probably go raise $1 million. Well, then you probably go after maybe like a $3 million property. Okay, so now I can go talk to bankers and talk to them about potentially what I'm going to look for here. And then I can see if I can't qualify the loan, like maybe I need a partner for that, or I can, right? So now it's more real and you're going to have an easier time committing to the process because you're not going to go into more unknowns. I found this great property, but now I got to raise money somehow. And then I got to make sure I can figure out how to get a loan. So you do everything up front, then you can start rolling, right? And so you're always having conversations with investors because, again, like a great deal for us may not be great for the investor. It couldn't be right time. Maybe they want a short-term hold. Maybe they want a longer hold than we're doing. Who knows, right? Maybe they just want to be in the stock market. But the more conversations you can have, you can figure out what they want and how you can help them.
Yeah. If I had to go back and do everything over again, I would have put more focus on capital raising up front. My philosophy was I can find a deal, I can underwrite, I can do all of those, skill-based type things, right? And my philosophy was I'll just find a partner that can help me raise the money. But, when push comes to shove, having those investors, just like Jason was saying, having the knowledge that I've got $1 million, soft committed already it's greatly going to help everything you do. But anyway, that said, we are almost out of time. So I got one question that I'm going to ask each of you. Jason, you go first. How can our listeners learn more about you?
Sure. So we already talked about Multifamily Live event. Thank you so much for talking about that. Go over to YarusiHoldings.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Jason Yarusi if you want to watch some running and workout stuff we're always doing.
All right. Awesome. That sounds great. And Sassy, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
So I do have my own website. It's www.thelegacyheritage.com. The name of my company is called The Legacy Heritage Group. I'm on email. I suck at social media. So I'm trying to get better at that. I am on LinkedIn, but I have to get better at that. So yeah, that is the best way to reach out to me, or they can email me info@thelegacyheritage.com.
All right. And we'll put that information in the show notes. So for anybody listening, if you want to contact Sassy, just, tap show notes, scroll and tap her email address and it takes you right there. All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you for coming on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a little bit too.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Jason and Brian. This was awesome.
All right. And that's a wrap.